Hey, how's it going? So today I'm going to tell you a story about a job that I ran. This was my first really big job. I was with a company called Gaylor, and I had just left. Well, I was at Intel originally, and I really had a great team at Gaylor. We were at Intel. We were doing tool install, and it was really fun. I had a great team of leaders, and the crew I had was really great, and we really killed it together as a group. And the company came to me about running. Well, they came to everybody really about running a job in Tucson, and nobody really wanted to go to Tucson. At that point, I had never lived in Had I lived in Tucson? I had lived in Tucson already. I had lived in Tucson and left, and I had fun the first time I lived in Tucson, so I wasn't opposed to it. But the main thing was, Sinclair and Little Richie. I had custody of Ariana, and so right after that time, a situation arose where Sinclair and Little Richie were going to go and live with their mom for the first time in their lives at that point. I think they were like 12 and 13. They were either maybe a little bit older. Maybe Sinclair was high school age already, and Richie was junior high school. But they were going to move to outside of Tucson to Vail, and at their grandparents' house with their mom. So when this occurred, I wanted to be closer to them, and like I said, I already had Ariana. So I went to my company and I was like, hey, I am interested in running this job. And of course, Joey was living in Tucson at the time, and I ended up just renting a room from him. He had a small house at the time. This is before he went to San Diego. He ended up going to San Diego while I was in Tucson, and I ended up just taking over the house. And Mikey D came and stayed with me for a little bit during this time. And this job was really unique because besides being the largest job I'd ever ran and having nearly 100 electricians on this job at different times, because it was in Tucson, that the corporate office was in Phoenix, I didn't really get bothered too much. My superintendent showed up once a week, and he walked the job, and then he kind of just left me alone. I got to do my own thing, and I had just worked under him at Intel, and he trusted me because my shit was on point. So, I didn't really have any problems with him or any of the things I was doing. And he was very hands off. He'd come in and do his walk, and then be on his way. So when I first got there were probably, it was basically 14 stories up and 2 stories down. There's a student housing building right next to U of A. When I got there, I would say probably 5 or 6 of the floors had been poured. All the underground had been done. The deep underground had been done, and we were heading up. And like I said, at this time, I was seeing Sinclair and Little Richie on the weekends. I was trying to get home as often as I could on the weekends so Ariana could see her mom. And it was a trying time already as it was. And then on top of that, I had worked with one of the worst general contractors I had ever worked with. I had never seen people build like those guys did. And apparently, as the course of the job went on, other people that had worked with this group before said that all their jobs were like this, where they would put all the trades in an area. It was almost like they were trying to put all of us against each other. I had cut a couple deals with the drywall, excuse me, with the drywall foreman, and and so, we were on we had a good working relationship. Pretty much I got along with everybody on that job, all the other people in my position, for all the other trades. So there were a few times when these guys would try to have the drywallers close up walls before we had gotten there. What's the point of that? Why would you not say, hey, you guys need to get inside of these walls because we're going to close them up, and instead just have them close them up and then try to make the job harder on us, because now we have to remove drywall to get our stuff in, and then they're going to try to bill us in the end for the drywallers having to redo their work. So lucky for me, I had a good relationship with those guys, and they'd contact me and be like, hey, we're being told to do XYZ, and so I'd have to rush guys over there and get on that part of the job. So this went on for some time. It wasn't horrible. It was stressful for me. I started losing sleep occasionally, but at this point, it wasn't that bad. And then one day, then the holidays came in the middle of this job, and the main branch manager who ran the whole branch out of our office contacted me directly, which he had never done before. I talked to the guy a bunch of times. Really nice guy. We had a good rapport, but he had never called me directly. And then this day he calls me, and he's like, it was the weekend before Thanksgiving, and he tells me that we're gonna drop the amount of guys we have on the job from November to December, and we'll man back up in January. And so I'm gonna have to do a mass layoff. Also, mind you, that a handful of these guys, most of the foremen that worked under me included, had just done a nearly identical job across the street. I was told before I took over this job, when it was in limbo and they didn't have somebody to take over to run this job, I was told that they had to take 10,000 hours off of this job and put it on the job across the street to pull it out of the deep red, which in the non-union world, as a GF running a big job like this, you rely on the bonus at the end of the job to supplement your income. And in a job that big, it could be pretty large. I think that 10,000 hours would probably equate to, I don't know, thousands of dollars in my pocket. I believe at that company, it was like, I think it was a percentage of profit. I want to say it was like 10% of profit. I don't remember what it was, but there was a bonus structure, and whatever you made in profit, you got a percentage of it. So 10,000 hours is a lot. I ended up, even without the 10,000 hours, ended up under budget on that job, and I finished on time. But I'm skipping to the end. So they come to me and they're like, hey, you got to lay off. But here's the deal: there's a handful of people that did 100 hours a week for a month to finish that job across the street, and I feel obligated to them. So here's a list of people that can't be laid off. So he gave me a list of about 20 guys, and then I had 5 foremen under me, so there's 25, of course, plus myself is 26. So I go to my foreman and I'm like, I gave each of them, go through your crews and give me a list of a couple guys you can't live without. So they did, and I got those guys, plus, I would say I had about 25 spaces to fill, something like that, besides the list and the names that the guys gave me. And also on that week when this layoff was to occur on Wednesday, I had to give the office the names earlier in the week because they had to cut checks. So on Monday, like, I don't know, a couple dozen guys show up from another job, and they were told that layoffs were coming on my job, but they didn't have to worry about that. But nobody told me that. And had they told me that, it would have been an issue, because it would have been the names that they gave me that I couldn't lay off, plus these guys, plus the foreman, plus me. It doesn't leave any room for anybody else, not very many more people. And nobody told me that. So those guys, unfortunately, came from another job where they were supposed to sit temporary, and they had a week to earn their position in this situation. And so I'm going through with the foreman, and watching all these guys and trying to determine who I'm going to keep and who I'm not going to keep. I want to keep, of course, the best guys. I want to keep the guys that are always there, the guys that, really hustle. And I get to the end of the week. I give them my list of names. That Wednesday, they drop off checks, and I start laying people off. It's like an hour or two till quitting time, and I start sending them down in droves and laying them off, sending them home. Well, these guys that came from their job are furious, and they all call their superintendent, who told them they would not be laid off, and they're cussing. They're like, "What the hell?" And he's telling them, hold on, I'll fix it. Just give me a minute." And he calls the superintendent, and he's a superintendent. He calls my superintendent, and my superintendent is just basically like, "It's Rich's job. You got to call Rich. You're calling the wrong guy. I can't help you. I don't know nothing about what you're talking about." Well, he refuses to call me. He refuses to talk to me. We never met before, and he just lets those guys get fired and get laid off, and basically is furious about it, and then just sits on it for months. We had a situation where we all had to meet somewhere to watch a video from the corporate office, and I met him that day, and he kind of turned his nose up at me. He did shake my hand, but he kind of turned his nose up at me. And then the next time I seen him, he's walking my job. My boss had given us 2 weeks notice, and the first week, that guy showed up a couple of times. And the second week, he showed up every single day, but refused to speak a word to me. For the first 4 days, I would say hi, I would be pleasant, and he would just ignore me and act like I wasn't there. Just walk right past me, like I had done something wrong, like I peed in his oatmeal or something. And so, and mind you, months had gone by, had gone by this time. So, the last day, my boss is there, and this guy's there, and we're all walking together, and he's forced to interact with me now. And at the end of the day, when everybody was kind of parting ways, and my boss was going to leave for the last time, and he says to me, "You know what? I like you. If I didn't, I would berate you, belittle you, and run you off." And then starting Monday morning, the next week, he began this campaign of berating me and belittling me and trying to run me off. And it was difficult. I'd never really quit anything in my life, and I definitely never left a job that I was running. Unless they're like, you got to go. It doesn't matter how difficult the job becomes or how difficult the situation I find myself in. I never quit. You never just walk away. You figure it out. You get it done. And so this guy, man, he really went out of his way to to make my life miserable. He just did some really messed up things, and he was constantly trying to call me out in front of the other workers. You know, they had a lot of these guys really liked me, and they respected me. And this guy, there was an incident where in front of everybody. So I had a foreman who's a good friend of mine and who's on my social media, so he'll probably see this, named Andy Sansanito, and Andy had demoted himself. He didn't want to be a foreman anymore. He wanted to just have his tools on and work. And this guy, Brian, knew that about Andy. And so he calls Andy out of the group in the morning in front of everybody, the foreman, everybody, and he tells him, "Hey, I'm going to give you a group of guys, and you're going to go and you're going to trim out these areas, and you're in charge, and you're not going to let anybody tell you otherwise. And I'm going to give you 4 or 5 guys to do this task with you, and you lead them. You're in charge." And Andy's like, "Okay, whatever you need me to do." And everybody was terrified of this guy. The Hispanic guys that came from that other job site had a nickname for him. They called him Chamugu. And one day I asked him what that meant. Apparently it means demon. And that was what they called this guy. Brian Rowland was his name. And Brian tells Andy, he's in charge, he's going to give him 4 or 5 guys, and they're going to go do what's called trimming out this area, which is basically putting all the plugs and switches in. And he calls out 3 or 4 guys, and then he turns to me and says, "You have tools?" I said, "Yeah, of course I have tools." He said, "Well, go grab them." And he tells Andy I'm the 5th guy in front of everybody, and everybody's just like, "What the hell?" Even me, I was like, at that point, I probably should have quit. Actually, I probably should have whooped his ass. But anyways, so I just grinned and bared it and got through it. And now I'm trying to run this job because he can't be there every day because he's got his own job to run. On top of just being dry humped up and down the field every time he's on site. And during this time, and then like I said, the general contractor was, to this day, still the worst general contractor I'd ever worked with. And my insomnia at this point had gotten to an all-time high. I mean, it started out where, like I would toss and turn and then get like an hour or 2 of sleep, and this would happen a couple days a week. And then one night I tossed and turned, and then my alarm went off, and it was the next day, and I didn't get any sleep. And then that was happening once or twice a week. And then finally it came to a head where I had almost an entire week where I didn't have any sleep. Like I was living my life in tunnel vision, cloudy tunnel vision, exhausted. It was one of the most difficult times. It was definitely the roughest job I ever ran, between the general contractor and the superintendent. At the end of the job, he we finished the job on time, under budget, and he ended up laying me off when the job was just about over. And then, I don't know when it was like a week or 2 later, I got a call from one of the guys in the management team that was at Intel that I had just left to come run this job, asking me about what happened. And I was kind of curious what he had heard, because I felt like I got done dirty, and I did get done dirty. And he basically, what they were told was that what Brian had said, or what they told me Brian said, was that when he came to me about where I wanted to go next, that I had told him that I was going to stay in Tucson, and that if there was no job in Tucson, that I was going to, just to lay me off, which of course wasn't the case. I ended up, as soon as that job was over, I packed up my stuff and went right back to Phoenix. I was extremely stressed after that job, and I took some time off. And when I went back to work, I ended up running the outage in at Palo Verde. I ended up going to doing the outage at Palo Verde, which was super cool, it was super fun, and it was a good way for me to get my head back in the game after that crappy job. There's actually quite a bit more to the story with me and Brian, which I'm not going to get into here. Although that'll be another story at another time. It's one of my more interesting things that have happened to me in my life. But yeah, we'll save that for another time. But yeah, that job. So there's the name of the job was, the name of the building was the Hub Tucson, and like I said, it was a student housing building. If you do a Google search for the Hub Tucson or student housing building, the Hub Tucson, you'll see pictures, artist rendition of it. And if you look at the pictures, you'll notice that all the windows are all scattered, all crazy down the building. And as the building was being built, I noticed that stood out to me. And as I seen the design of the rooms and how they laid out come to fruition, I realized that all of those windows could have been in a straight line. They all could have been symmetrical, and they weren't. They were all scattered and crazy, and I didn't understand why they did that, if it was a mistake or what. So one day I'm in a meeting, and the architect happens to be in this meeting that designed the building. Apparently it was a cookie cutter building, and they had done a bunch of them. There's one here at ASU, and this one was the only one that had that feature. And so after the meeting, I chased him down, and I was like, "Dude, you gotta tell me why you did this, why you ruined my fucking building." Ooh, excuse me, I cussed. That's how passionate I am about this situation. But so it turns out, if you look at the footprint of the building, it's like a U-shaped, and the third floor, above the third floor, which would be the roof of the third floor, is a big outdoor sitting area with the jumbotron, and then the building U's around it really strong. And as the building goes up, you'll notice that the arms of the U that slowly start to taper back as it goes up. Well, apparently that was not supposed to be part of the original design. The original design is it was supposed to be square all the way up, like the one across the street. The problem is that building is on the university property, but it butts up against a residential neighborhood. So the ordinance in Tucson says that the higher you go, the further you got to scale back. And so they had to basically cut chunks out of this building to accommodate the city ordinance. And they were really upset about it, to the point where they decided to destroy this building and run all of their windows just all haphazardly, willy-nilly across the building. You got to see it for yourself. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But anyways, so I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope everybody had a great Easter, which was yesterday. Make sure you stay prayed up. A lot of bad stuff coming our way. Have a good day.